Hi, good morning, everybody. We have come to Athikem after a period of 11 days. The rains were heavy, and so we could not uh, tap the rubber trees over here. Now the rain has abated, and we came today hoping that we could continue tapping. We may get another few weeks of tapping over here till the season dries out. The last few days I have been meditating on John chapter 6. It's a very interesting chapter in which Jesus speaks about more than that, he doesn't the miracle of feeding 4,000 people, and then he speaks about being the bread of life. He says, "I am the bread of life. Anyone who comes to me will never hunger, and anyone who drinks or who believes in me will never thirst." Two aspects of faith that he speaks about. One is the aspect of going to Jesus, and the other is the aspect of believing in Jesus. So I kept wondering, how could we go to Jesus? What is the basis? What is the means of going to Jesus? He's saying, I am the bread of life, and then he says, anyone who comes to me, or anyone who believes in me. Further on, he also speaks about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. When I related all these three aspects together, a very interesting thought came to me. Christians used to be called cannibals because they were eating the flesh and blood. And that's what, in the earlier centuries, Christians partly were persecuted because of the belief in the thought that people were being cannibalistic. What is Jesus speaking over here about? What is he speaking about? How can we eat his flesh and blood when he is no longer with us? And that was something that I was wondering and meditating on. When we eat something which is digestible, it gets absorbed into our person, into our body. And then I started thinking, if Jesus says, eat my flesh and drink my blood, it has to have some significance. When he says, eat my flesh, it means that absorb me into your person, absorb me fully into your person. And when he says, drink my blood, you see, in the Old Testament, drinking blood, the consumption of blood was prohibited because they believed that life was in the blood. So when Jesus is saying, drink my blood, he says, take my life into yourself. And this is what made me realize that when we go to Jesus, what Jesus means is, and when we go to Jesus and eat the bread or assume and believe that he is the bread of life, we are incorporating him into our person. We are imbibing him. He becomes part of my person. That is what Jesus would be trying to tell us. Make Jesus part of my life. And then when we believe in him, by drinking his blood, we take his life into our lives. A very interesting way of looking at it. You see, when in that whole chapter, Jesus speaks about the Father. He speaks about God as the Father, the Creator. And God as Creator is becoming appropriated to us through the life of Jesus. There is a certain level of metaphysical element over here. But there is nothing to be worried about because the spiritual experience is not something that requires a lot of intellect or whatever else. The spiritual experience is when we are able to, or when we consciously place ourselves in the sphere of God. And that is what Jesus does for us. He brings it to our understanding that God is not somewhere far away in the upper realms of existence, but God is very much available to us and can be part of us. He is not transcendent. He is with us. So Jesus is primarily telling us that, see, this life is given by God. And the most primary aspect of life should be in relationship with God. And he calls God as Father. Father is not merely a biological term. It has a lot more meaning than that. The creator, the nurturer, the protector, all these aspects, adjectives can be added to describe God as Father. So when Jesus is bringing God to us, he says, see, I am telling you about something or some experience that you can have that goes beyond the experience of this world. You are living in this world, but your life in this world can become meaningful and purposeful through the experience of the Creator. Jesus is becoming the bread of life. He is giving himself for us. To eat him, not in the cannibalistic fashion as we would understand, but to eat him would mean to ingest him, the whole person. And in that sense, we are able to see how he saw God, the Creator. To have the life in us that was in him would mean that Jesus had his life fully, totally in tune with the purposes of God. That brings a new understanding to us. To live life as Jesus did, in tune with God. To live life as Jesus did, trusting his Father. The dimensions of life now change from being a life that is immersed in this world to a life that is propelled by the faith in God and by the understanding that we can trust God and make this life meaningful. All the other areas of life, instead of saying other areas of life, all areas of life become tuned to our relationship with God. And based on this relationship, we are able to live life meaningfully and purposefully. Jesus becomes the medium of this relationship. And that is why he says, I am the bread. Bread is meant to give sustenance. And this bread gives us sustenance in life, to make life meaningful. Consider this. Meditate on this. That Jesus, the person, who brings us to God and shows us that life as given by God can be meaningful and purposeful, and for which he becomes the bread, who lays down his life. And his flesh, his blood, become the experience of never hungering, never being thirsty again. God bless you all. Thank you.